What's up guys, RaincloudGaming here. For once, not bitching about my inability to record new gameplay. Instead, today I've actually got a new Pacifism tutorial on the go, which I made using old footage that I've still got on my computer, and the reason that's going to work is because today's tutorial is a bit different to previous ones. Rather than just have me going on randomly over a piece of gameplay that is tangentially related to what I'm saying, obviously, but in a rather broad way. Instead, what I'm going to do is talk about a very specific subject and illustrate different points with particular pieces of gameplay. So it's taking a bit more brain power of old RaincloudGaming to try and work out how to do this, but I'm confident I can do it. So what I want to talk about is how to deal with multiple gates. And that's a difficult one, because of course though gates are your only weapon in this game mode, they're also another form of enemy. And I think one quite understandable approach to the situation is to try, whenever you get a chance to clear out some gates, if there's a big cluster of them, I think it's quite natural to try and take advantage of that and just get rid of the gates, even if you're not getting many points from them. However, that's not something that I do, unless it's absolutely necessary. What I do is, my rule of thumb with gates is to only ever explode them if they're going to get me a decent number of points or inflict some good damage on the blues. However, there are some exceptions to this, or one exception. The only time I'll get rid of a gate is if I think in the next few seconds it's going to cause me some difficulty. And let me give you an example of this. So here, I'm about to mosey on up to the top left corner to try and do some damage with the two gates that I see. But wait, there's been a spawn. I need to get out of there real quick, so rather than hang around and try and get a good angle on the one gate that's still available to me, I'm just gonna get rid of it as soon as I can and make sure I've got a decent angle to turn on to get away from this, what's now become a danger zone. So if we now restart it, boink! I didn't get much damage there, but it was worth doing. Now here, as I swing around, I've clocked some gates that I want to try and do some damage with, but I don't like how these two gates have gone. I think the bottom one is going to interfere with the angle I'd like to go in on the top one. So I need to take care of that first. So what my plan to do is, if you see the sort of T-shape has been formed, I'm going to explode the bottom one. I don't care if I get any damage from it. I'm just going to make sure I can go in on the horizontal one with a good angle to try and inflict as much damage as I can on the big cloud that's formed. So let's have a look at that. Take out the bottom one, and then I got a fairly good bite of it on the cloud. So those are the only situations where I personally would recommend taking out gates but aren't getting you points. For very specific situations where you know in advance what you want to do and you see a gate that's gonna cause problems with that. Instead, what I try to do is accumulate gates as much as possible. If I don't need them right now, then I'll leave them, because sooner or later I'm going to need them. And the further you get, as you get further into the 1, 2, 3 billion range, you want to have gates that you can call on in an emergency, because you can make really good escapes using gates if you need to. You might be really boxed in by a really thick looking cloud of blues, but if you've got enough gates on your side and you use them well, you can escape from what seem like hopeless situations. The problem is, when you do accumulate gates like that, they very rarely space themselves in a helpful way. Ideally you want one gate every, I don't know, few space squares, so you could very efficiently pick off massive clouds exactly how you want to, but that doesn't happen. Instead you often find them grouped together in awkward places. Now I think one of the real keys to the progress that I made was to really identify in my mind different multi-gate plays, if you like, different situations where I would do different things depending on the configuration of multiple gates. It would really have a big impact on the cloud, so on the blues and on my ability to survive. So what I want to do in this video now is talk about 3 different multi-gate plays that I think are important to be aware of. And some will come up more often than others, but I've used all 3 of these plays in my own progress, so I figured it could be helpful to talk about them explicitly. So if I can work out how I'm going to do this, let's get on with the video. Now the first of these multi-gate plays is what I call the Gaius Baltar. Gaius Baltar as a character is somebody who will do whatever it takes to survive. He will pull off incredible feats when required of him to save his own skin. In the same way, that's what I call hitting 2 gates at once. Whether they're crisscrossing in an X fashion, or if you can't even see there are 2 gates, it looks like there are just one. It's something I only do when I have to, but if I have to, you better believe I will do it without a second's hesitation. Let's take a look. So there's no real great secret to this one. You all know what I'm talking about. You want to hit 1 gate, but there's another one in the way, and you've got to take care of it. The reason I don't really like doing it is because, as far as I know, there's no real bonus, either in terms of score or in blast radius, for doing so. So I consider this to be a rather needless risk. But like here, I mean, I'm not getting out of this corner unless I hit at least 2 gates. Yeah, these 2 here at once, pretty much. So it's an important skill to learn. It's just not something I recommend doing on purpose, or unless you absolutely have to. Just like Gaius Baltar does any number of shameful things. He doesn't want to, but when he has to, he does. I think the real master of this, again, is 41314X. When he does it, it's not an act of desperation, it's born of his own icy pragmatism, and it's amazing to watch. I only do it when I have to. Now the second multi-gate play, and I think it's a step up in terms of the skill level required and the value gained from pulling it off, is what I call the conveyor belt of death. Now this is in some ways the opposite of what I just described, whereas the Gaius Baltar is hitting 2 gates but really only getting the value of 1. This is where you're in a situation where you could possibly get 2 gates at the same time, pull off Gaius Baltar, but instead you intentionally hit the 2 gates separately, spinning in a circle and staying basically on the same trajectory, but hitting 1, getting the explosion and the damage from it, and hitting the next one. And the way that the cloud of diamonds moves towards you and gets eaten up by 1 explosion, bam, then another explosion, bam. It's like a conveyor belt, and the diamonds are just rolling on into your trap that you set, and you're just chomping away at them. And I think it's a really important skill to learn, and that when you do it, you need to hit the gate as well as possible, which means hit it so that the orange bit at the end of the gate explodes as far into the blues as possible. Let's take a look at some examples. So here we go. I see these 2 gates lining up. I could go for them both, but bam, I hit 1, and then I get 2 explosions out of it, where I could have just got 1 there. Here, I'll see another gate spawn now, and notice how after the first one, I pull back on myself to make the blues go onto that second gate as much as possible, thereby maximising the hit. This next one's a very good example because it took very precise timing, but you'll see how this is a real conveyor belt type feel. Like I go around myself, 1, I'm not done, 2. Conveyor belt of death right there. This is another good example. The 2 gates really line up in a way that I very easily could have gotten both. But instead, at all times, it's so important to maximise damage and keep the cloud under control, so wherever you can, I would suggest hitting gates individually. And this one's not really a conveyor belt, it's just a case of me keeping calm amidst a large number of gates and all kinds of pressure, to try and just make sure I create separate explosions each time. Because that's what it's all about. You don't want the explosion of 1 gate to be wasted by being camouflaged in an explosion that's already happened. You don't want to waste damage. And here we go again. 1, 2. Always looking for the opportunity to do that. This one's less a case of me taking advantage of the conveyor belt, so much as just trying to make sure I avoid doing a Gaius Baltar play, because I don't want to waste those gates that are there in the corner. I could have gone through all of them and done a really cool slalom, but I want to leave those gates there. They're useful where they are, and if I end up back in that corner, they may very well save my skin and allow me to a really cool escape. Here again, I pull back myself, 1, 2, 3, to make sure I've always got the cloud right on my tail, so when I do explode the gate, I'll get as much kill death from it as possible. And one final example here. Here I just want to demonstrate that no matter the kind of pressure you're under, there's always room for a conveyor belt of death, and it's so important the further you go, the more you need to do this. use each and every gate to keep that bastard cloud under control. I mean, I was under so much pressure there, 7 billion almost, but I'm still doing the method, the conveyor belt method, and that is what's keeping me alive, because I'm maximising damage, and I'm keeping the cloud in on itself. Alright. So, the third and final technique I want to talk about is a little hard to explain, which is why I wanted to illustrate each of these quite specifically, in quite a lot of detail. And this is basically a technique for completely obliterating a cloud, a sizable cloud. And what the technique is you use a gate to create an explosion as normal on the outside-ish, on the surface of a big pack. But you use that explosion to get to a gate that would otherwise be inaccessible, that's buried deep within the cloud that you otherwise couldn't get to. And ideally, you use that gate to get further into the cloud, to completely destroy it from within. And this is a technique that it really depends on luck and observation, because you need all the gates to align correctly. So it's not something you'll necessarily get to do even on a really big run, but if you see it, the circumstances come together, if you see the planets are aligned in the correct way, it's something I think you should be watchful of and really try and jump on. And I call this Return of the Jedi, because whereas end of episode 4, the attack on the Death Star remains very much on the surface and in the trenches, and as we know, it only partially succeeds in destroying it. In Return of the Jedi, the Millennium Falcon, it goes deep into the Death Star and explodes it from within. And that's really the principle that I'm talking about here. You use these gates, you chain together a series of gates to get deeper and deeper into the cloud. And it might only happen once in a really good run, it might not happen at all, but it's something to be mindful of. And not necessarily even to completely destroy a cloud, but if you see that from one gate you can get from the outside of a cloud to the interior, just to do some extra damage, is something you should really try and do. So let's take a look-see. So here I'm just flying along, minding my own business, when I see these 3 gates aligned, and I'm watching, and now it's on. Bang, bang, bang. The entire cloud is gone. This one's a bit less decisive, but as you can see, there's a whole mess of gates, and there's nothing really showing itself. But when I see these 2 gates on the right, they're kind of coming into contact, so I use that one there to get to the second one, blammo, and although it doesn't completely destroy the gate, it still does some really good damage. And here again, 1, 2, it's not complete, but it's still some really big impact upon it. And here's another one, it's just a case of always just keeping an eye out for where gates come together in a fortuitous kind of way, and you can really buy yourself some time. So it's not a case of keeping it under control like the other methods, it's a case of just getting a big bite. And that's basically the principle of it. It's a fairly recent thing that I've become conscious of. I mean, I've always probably done it to an extent, but I really tried to incorporate it into my game intentionally, recently. And like I say, it's not something you can really depend upon. It's just something that as you get better at the game and you become kind of calmer and more aware of what's going on, you can kind of just look out for it and look for the right circumstances, and if you get the chance, you can really push into the cloud. And that's what the game's all about, the more you can push the diamonds in on themselves, and destroy them in as meaningful a way as possible, the more space you'll have and the longer you'll survive. So hopefully these techniques will, hopefully this video has helped to kind of define some of the different situations where you want to think differently about how to deal with multiple gates. Sometimes it's a case of just surviving as best you can, using them pragmatically. Other times it's a real opportunity to do some serious damage.